Hello, everyone, and welcome to another special bonus episode of the Warhoundcast. This week, I'm joined by Rich.
Hi.
And Angus.
Hello.
And Angus joins us as a special guest this week because, spoiler warning, he won the Surrey Championship. So we've brought him on to talk about his list and about the tournament in general. So we'll start off with just going through the overall standings. If you haven't already seen it, they are available on the Facebook page. But just going from bottom to top, we had 30 players in total. If these are wrong, or if I pronounce your name wrong, I do apologise. We did get me and Nathan got quite a lot of things wrong when we were doing our list review. So apologies to anyone that was suffered there and suffers again. But bottom we have stand-in. Then Nathan came second to last, Most of the bottom players are there because they had to drop at some point or another, including Nathan, who I think only got 2 games in. Then we had Mark Waterhouse, Michael Corr, Vanessa Clark, Tom Forstner, Mo Shawa, Jamie Stone, Jordan Milton, Matt Bourne, Stuart Barnes. We're up to 20th now. Then Jack Masters, Luke Lee Bruin, James Marks, Lee Smith, Matt Reed, David Taylor. Rich came in 13th. James Pilkington. Many of our unanimous pick for number 1 ended up 12th. Although he had a couple. He was high up throughout the tournament.
Was the 8th Centurion guy?
Yeah.
James was the Centurion player.
Yeah.
Then Craig came 11th. Rich Smith came 10th. We don't have a 9th.
Yeah, I've seen that. It looks a bit messed up. There,
we don't have a 9, and we don't have 2 players tied on points. So, you're going to blame James for that. 8th was Paulie Wallace. 7th was Joe Malem. 6th, Daniel Farrell. 5th, Michael Costello. 4th was me. Hooray! 3rd was Mark Audrey. 2nd was Dennis. And 1st, as we mentioned earlier, was Angus. So, we ended up with... I think top 3 were all Imperial forces, but none of them were pure Space Marines, which is nice to see. So Mark had the Guard tank list. Dennis was a mix of Blood Angels,
and Knights and
Blood Angels, Knights, and Admech. Angus was Sisters. I'll just complete the top 5. I was Eldar, and Michael was Chaos. So top Space Marine player was in 6th, which is signs that Marines are not at all broken and we're in a very healthy meta, I think. But yeah, Angus, do you want to go over your list? And given how poor a job me and Nathan did describing it in our list preview of basically there are some sisters, do you want to sort of go over it and sort of pick out any units that did really well or really badly for you?
Yeah, sure. I can give a basic rundown of the list. The list is primarily made up of 3 detachments, made up of 2 battalions of Valorous Heart. If you're not familiar with Sisters, that's the order which allows you to ignore AP -2 with a couple of buffs and has a 6-up Feel No Pain, which is obscenely useful. And then a Vanguard detachment of Bloody Rose, which is the one which gives you a little bit of an extra edge in melee, and most importantly gives you a +1 to wounded melee, which is, as everybody knows, extremely good. The teeth of the list are made up of a pair of maxed out Seraphim squads with 2 pairs of Inferno pistols each, which are, if you don't know what those are 6-inch melter pistols. 2 maxed units of Repentia and Rhinos. Repentia are the girls with Eviscerators, and they eat virtually anything in melee because they hit strength 6, AP 4, damage 2, and you can give +1 to wound. And then the remaining teeth of the list is triple exorcists, which are, if you aren't familiar with exorcists, they fire 3d3, strength 8, AP 3, damage d6 shots, and they are T8 with 12 wounds. So they're obscenely annoying to put down. Then scattered around that are various support characters and Celestine.
Cool stuff. Just while we're talking about the list, whenever I came over to watch one of your games, it always seems like you were using a miracle dice to fix a roll. How often does that come up in your games? How often a turn were you using that?
Always. You constantly use miracle dice. Like they're the way to get an edge on your opponent. Yeah, that's just straight up how it is. Sorry, go on.
Were you using them more often than CP?
Yes, yeah. Like Miracle Dice, once you get the ball rolling, you use more Miracle Dice. If you're not familiar with Miracle Dice, you get one per round. Almost every single Sisters player will take the Warlord trait, which gives you an extra one per turn. And then in addition to that, you get one every time you kill something on the Adeptus Sororitas unit in a phase, including, say, the Overwatch or movement phases, if you are able to do that. And one whenever, say, for example, a Repentia unit dies, one of your characters dies, or you roll a natural one on a morale check, which comes up surprisingly often if you're running huge numbers of minimum squads. Because all you do is you lose one girl. You can't possibly fail the morale check, but you roll a 1, you get a Miracle Dice.
Not too dissimilar of demons getting things back.
Yeah, exactly like that, yeah.
Okay, so that's cool. And a much better rundown than me and Nathan gave. I'm just trying to think. Before we did the list preview last time, or after, depending which order you listened, we made our guesses for... Me and Rich made some guesses for top 3. And I think we were all entirely wrong on everything. I picked Angus as coolest, and which is kind of similar to best. So I got something close. Otherwise, my picks came 5th. Did not finish. Rob sadly had to drop. And 12th. Who did you pick, Rich? I'm trying to remember.
Joe, I think, to win.
7th. I think you had James. 12th.
I had Rob, but then obviously Rob pulled out, didn't he? And then I had James.
Okay. Nathan. I'm trying to remember Nathan's picks. I think I was one of Nathan's picks, so I think he got closest.
Your list seems to be the scariest list, if I'm honest, aside from the 2 Raven Guard Centurion lists.
Yeah, I fought both of those, as we will.
That's also something which I'd like to point out. My wins were quite a lot down to luck, including luck of the draw. I never played a Marine army, like a proper Marine army, throughout the entire tournament.
Well, Dennis's list, a lot of the power in Dennis's list was in his Marines.
Yeah, but it's not like like when you say Marines, what comes to mind is either Iron Hands or Raven Guard these days, and I was lucky enough not to face either of them. I know there weren't any. Sorry, I know there weren't any Iron Hands at the tournament, which I believe was lucky for everybody involved.
No one was complaining. I'm like, where are all the Iron Hands players?
Yes, something never said by anybody ever.
I thought the meta in general was quite healthy at the tournament. There was quite a lot of chaos. I thought they were probably the most dominant in terms of numbers. Just off the top of my head, I haven't checked the lists, but we had most factions represented. We had we had Elder, we had Dark Elder. We didn't have a pure Harlequins, but Craigslist had a lot of them. We had lots of different lots of different Imperium lists. We had Sisters, we obviously had Marines, we had Mix, we had Knights, we had Admech, we had Guard, and we had all sorts of different Chaos, typically Chaos Marines and Knights. I don't recall there being any demons or demon battalions, although I think Rob was due to bring one and dropped out. I think the only faction we didn't see any of was Gene Stealer Cults.
Excluding Tau.
Oh, and Tau. But no one's sad about that.
No.
Or at least the sort of typical Tau triple Riptide, loads of drones list, which is not particularly fun to play. I thought considering we had 30 people, we had a really, really good meta, I thought. And we even had a Grey Knights list, which definitely wasn't weird and janky. But
very broken rules about Grey Knights that Joe was using.
But yeah, if we go round each of us one at a time and go through our round 1 game and then circle back round to do round 2 each of us. I will start off with my round game first. Done.
Yeah.
But my opponent never
won
showed up.
Right?
Yeah, I won. I won without rolling a single dice. No, sadly, my opponent never showed up, and our backup player was Leo, who ended up playing.
I played Leo. Leo was running double Reposter Executioner, Gulliman, then it was 3 maxed blobs of intercessors. Yeah, that's correct.
Yep.
And I got quite lucky that game in a couple of ways. The one which strikes out straight to mind is the fact that I believe it was either the second or third battle round, his one remaining repulsor executioner managed to roll 3 2s for its wound roll, which is which there was no way she could re-roll it because he was out of CP, and which basically swung the entire game in my favour in terms of attrition. I was also lucky. I don't know whether you'd count it as a skill or luck, but I picked the side of the table which the L blocker in the centre was faced towards, if that makes sense. So I was able to occupy the central L blocker, which gave me a massive advantage.
I think you put that down as a skill, given that that's your disadvantage for not going first, or potentially less likely to go first, because that was.
I was really worried about going second against him because the laser destroyers are just so nasty. And if 2 of them roll well, that's 2 of my exorcists gone, and then I can't win that game. But beyond that, I got some good charges out of cover. I think Leo struggled to hold more, given the fact that I was able to wipe his intercessor units quite quickly. And
Leo's a very defensive player typically as well. He likes to castle up and sit in his little bubble.
I think if he had perhaps I don't know. If Leo had spiked, got lucky, killed 2 of my exorcists first turn, and then focused entirely on taking out the Repentia, he could have just walked up the board and punched me to death with his intercessors, because I wouldn't have been able to do anything about that. But I mean, he didn't know, so.
Hindsight's 2020. What about your first game, Rich?
So I played Jordan Milton. He ran a battalion of Iron Warriors, and he had a Supreme Command detachment of Demons. Weirdly enough, he got first turn, but he decided to give it to me, which I thought was quite bizarre, because I was thinking, well, I'm just going to use my whirlwinds to just plink off wounds from your Derridos at the back. I can see what he explained to me at the end of the game why he did it, because he thought he was trying to bait me out forwards, but all that was so he can get in combat. But all that was going to do is just let me just get closer to him with my Centurions and my Leviathan and just blow him away. The only thing that did cause me trouble was when he deep struck his Obliterators, but I knew they were going to deep strike anyway, so that's why I screened like my backfield. So he was never going to drop them down in my deployment zone, so I knew that I was safe there. So they came down, gave me a bit of trouble, but once I got rid of them, that it was pretty much more or less game over for him. I was killing more, holding more. I think I almost maxed out my secondaries as well, and I think it was kind of done. I think the game was kind of done by the end of turn 4. But yeah, no, it was an enjoyable game, and he played very, very well. I just think if he had decided to keep first turn, then it might have been a bit different. But I don't know. It was a good game though.
It's an interesting one. I do find in a lot of the chapter approved missions, going second can be a big advantage.
Yeah.
In ITC, I tend to find it's almost always better going first.
I think it really comes down to the terrain and how the objectives are placed on that terrain. If you're in a position where you can blast your opponent off the objectives which he's holding every single turn when you're going second, then it's generally better to go second, in my opinion.
Okay. I kind of disagree. I think ITC's more killy.
You're right in that respect. In the fact that if you've got a list which can be extremely aggressive turn 1, then yeah, you should almost probably go first, because the fact that if you can get the ball rolling on kill points, then your opponent probably can't catch up.
Yeah, I think the exceptions are typically more where you've got 2 melee-oriented lists, where that not having first turn of shooting is not a big deal. But I don't think there are a lot of those in the meta at the moment. So I don't think going second in ITC is normally the right option. It can be. You can build a list around it. But especially against Marines as a threat in the moment, I find it's a real struggle going second in a lot of matchups. But there we are. So round 2, I had my first game. If I'm honest, I did get a bit salty in this one. And I don't normally do that, so apologies to Dennis. I said it at the time. I was playing Dennis and his Blood Angels. This was a deploy first, go first one. And Dennis got the roll off to deploy first. And we had Pointy Hammer and Pointy Dawn of War, as it were. And I was really struggling to hide from his units with his deployment. So my ingenious plan was to castle up on basically the far side, or the middle and the far sides to where the bonus objective was. There was only 3 objectives in this one. And try and make sure that meant when he alpha struck me with his double move Death Company, or pre-game move, start of game move Death Company, which I couldn't hide from on the deployment, he either had to kill a lot of my stuff or get the bonus, which was a reasonable tactic, especially as I could hide from some of his smaller guns that way. In particular, his Moirax with the grav guns, which I was rather scared of. I couldn't hide from his big knight, but there we are. It almost worked. First turn, he went in, killed a couple of not particularly big units, and took the bonus. The problem was my first turn back was really, really mediocre. I didn't kill anything in shooting. My psychic phase whiffed. I only just killed something in the fight phase and was really on the back foot. Dennis then chucked in his Sanguinary Guard turn 2, really threatened to overrun my lines. Probably could have, but he rolled quite poorly and I rolled quite well for my saves on the Wraith Guard. I managed to kill a lot of them back, and I sort of managed to slowly stabilize. But I'd run out of firepower to get rid of his knight. Dennis played it quite cautiously from there, more cautiously than I would have done. We had quite an interesting chat afterwards, how we differed in our approach to the game. I always try and take the aggressive option. And when I was sort of struggling to stabilize, I'd have chucked the knight into the opponent's lines to try and finish him off. Dennis had the theory that he was ahead, he didn't need to take the risk, and ended up winning the game by a couple of points. He was able to keep putting pressure on my bonus objective.
What did you pick as your secondaries against Dennis?
I picked Headhunter, Marked for Death, and Kill His Knight, or do loads of wounds to his knight.
Yeah.
I got the first 2 very well, and Dennis just would not fail a 4-up invuln save on his knight. And when he did, I rolled. I shot him with my Wraith Lord Bright Lances a bunch of times. When they finally went through, I rolled 1, reroll into 1, into 2 damage, which he saved to feel I paid off. I'm just like, no, why won't you just take anything? But yeah, Dennis played it very smartly from there and kept me just out of range the whole game. I needed a miracle play in the last turn to get it back, and ended up roughly, I think it was 30-25 in the end. Roughly speaking, but really good game.
I played Mo's list, game 2. I'm afraid I can't pronounce Mo's last name. I'm sorry. He was running a Lord of Skulls, which I hadn't played against previously, in an Alpha Legion detachment, with the Martial Possessions to give it that juicy 4-up invuln, as well as a couple of other things. He had a 3 Derridera Dreadnoughts in an Alpha Legion detachment, and was running a Cult of Magic battalion, I want to say, which is one of the new Thousand Suns cults that they got in Psychic Awakening. I wasn't really sure what to expect from it, because I've never played a Lord of Skulls before, but I am relatively familiar with the whole, throw a giant nasty thing in your face and then exploit the gap which it creates, which I assumed he was going for. I feel like this game hinged on him getting off his psychic bomb that he wanted, because we talked about it after the game where he said that he thought that I was misunderstanding his game plan, and in my head his game plan was chuck the Lord of Skulls at me, cause a huge amount of chaos, and then chuck the Psychers and some rubrics which he had at me, and exploit it, which is basically what his game plan was. It's just that I wasn't entirely familiar with his psychic spells. Like the Cult of Magic, he was running a sort of like a version. I'm not sure what it's called, but it's a version of the Infernal Gateway spell. I want to say it's one of the spells where he would hit something for D3 mortal wounds +1, and then everything around it would take D3 +1. And then he could stack that with Infernal Gateway or another variant of that spell, and thus presumably do an enormous amount of mortal wounds if you've castled up loads, which I did. However, I mentioned deny his warp time when he was throwing the Lord of Skulls into my lines, which meant that I was able to pick it off and basically just ignore it. And then which left a gigantic hole, which I then chucked a bunch of things into and killed a bunch of his characters. The fact that the army, because I was running Sisters and I mentioned Valorous Heart earlier, I could basically just ignore his Butcher Cannons because he was running double Butcher Cannon Derrideos, which are AP -1. And if I can put something in cover, it gets a 2-up save against his Derrideos regardless, which basically meant that I was easily able to win the War of Attrition. So at the end of the game, I ended up with 3 exorcists on basically full health. Not much else, but then again, he ended up with nothing on the board. So I think that was a victory. His psychic spells did go off. I got quite lucky in the fact that he intended to use the Alpha Legion auto-explode strat, or add 3 to explodes roll, on a Rhino that was sat next to most of my HQ characters. I rolled the dice before he declared the strat, which he was a bit crestfallen at, but it rolled a 1, so it wouldn't have made a difference, even if he had declared it, because it wouldn't have exploded anyway, which is very lucky. Skillful, yeah, it was a skillful one. I will mention, that game, the normal white dice that we're using were rolling ridiculously hot, and I switched to the GW dice that I use as backup dice, because I felt like they were perhaps being suspiciously hot. Which is kind of a theme throughout the tournament, if I'm honest. Like, you know how often you feel like you have 1 or 2 bad turns of dice and that decides a game? I never had that throughout the entire tournament. My opponents had that. I never had that. Also, as a tech choice, he had a Lord Disco, which he threw into my lines. I somehow managed to forget about a Lord Disco that was sat in front of me and shot things behind it. But it was okay, because I had Braziers of not Braziers of Eternal Flame, Braziers of Holy Fire, which is a war gear option for Canonesses, which just you pick a unit that's 12 inches away, and on a 2-up it takes D3 mortal wounds. Or if it's a demon, it takes D6. And it's a fantastic anti-disco Lord device. Which was able to help polish off his Disco Lord. His Disco Lord also, at one point, threw itself into a unit of my Seraphim, which were within the Image of Fire's ability to ignore AP -2. And he managed to kill a whole total of 4 Seraphim with a full health Lord Discordant.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, those things have a very reasonable chance of taking a night out.
Yeah, so, exactly. That's what I thought. I was just like, oh, they're gone. But no.
But I do, before I forget, because I was meaning to think of this earlier, one thing that was very cool looking at your game, especially compared to a lot of the others, was rounds sort of 4. Both sides typically, I thought, or it looked like, had a bit more left than you'd normally expect at that side. Because I think it's, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like Sisters perhaps don't have the same damage output as a lot of other factions.
No.
But their resilience is...
But their resilience is off the charts. Like, you can... I found that you can pretty much always outlast your opponent, provided they aren't swimming in AP3 firepower. Like, your Eldar list, which I was very worried about facing.
Well, we've got 2 tournaments coming up where we could face each other, so we'll save our ingenious battle plans for then.
But the way which I'd usually play is just castle up, and then if my opponent comes near me, I'll send the Repentia out and eat them. It's
a... Sorry, I've interrupted you again. But it's a very... The cool thing about it, which I like, was it put a lot more focus on, I think, objectives and things rather than just kills, which I think is a very good thing.
Yeah, that's why I found the Seraphim very useful, because they were... Yeah, well, I'll talk about it later, but they were very useful for grabbing objectives off people.
Cool. Rich?
Okay, so yeah, my second game was against James Pilkington's Raven Guard Sent Spam. Ultimately, I lost that game. I got first turn, but I think my problem was My mistakes was I chose secondaries. I chose one of my secondaries. I chose. I think it's King of the Hill, the one
Oh,
where
that
you
was very
hold
brave.
the objective. Yeah, I thought I said to him. I even said to him when I was choosing it, "Oh, I'm going to be ballsy. I'm gonna take that secondary and try and get points from it." Um, but the other mistake I made was that I was also very conscious of the fact that at some point, turn 2 or 3 or whatever point, he was going to deep strike all his Centurions. So I then, because I was conscious of that, I just castled up my deployment zone. So I picked a secondary that I was never pushing for. And because I was worried that if I did that, it would create obviously a huge gap in my back line. He deep strike him there, then I've got a problem at the back. And at the same time, he's got whirlwinds, and he's got 2 whirlwinds and 2 thunderfire cannons. So he's plinking off, trying to plink off my intercessors with his thunderfire cannons, and at that same time, he's trying to use his whirlwinds against mine and even my centurions. I did, however, in my first turn, take one of his whirlwinds out, and I think I did take the other one out. But the problem was on his turn 2, because he deep struck his centurions all of them in turn 3. In turn 2, he his smash captain. It's like I can't remember what it's called, but it's like the Necrons have the veil of time when they can teleport.
Oh,
so he teleport.
Yeah, they've
I
got
can't.
a wall of trait, I think, and he can cast Shadow Step from his Librarian.
That's it, Shadow Step. So he did that on a smash captain, and he got his charge off. Also against my whirlwinds. So I think he only tagged one of them. But because they were so clumped together, when it came into my turn, I'd obviously move the one that wasn't tagged out the way, so I can move the other one out of combat because he didn't manage to kill it, funnily enough. Which meant then one of my whirlwinds the next turn in my next shooting phase couldn't fire, and the other one was then hitting on 4s, and I think I rolled like 2d3. I think I rolled like a 2 and a 1, so I only had 2 shots anyway, so that didn't help. And then by the time he deep struck his Assault Centurions, it was like right in front of me, all across the middle. He destroyed my Centurion Devastators. He didn't kill my Leviathan, however, I don't think, because I was literally I was using the Duty Eternals strat more or less every round. But he was plinking off my intercessors. The Chaplain Dread stayed alive the whole game. He couldn't get them. I think by towards the end of the game, I did kill more or less all of the Centurions. I think he had like 1 squad left of about 4 in them. And he had his scouts holding the middle objective anyway. So he was getting kill more, hold more. He just absolutely battered me. I messed up. I know I messed up, but even if I did choose my secondaries sensibly, and if I did make the push, I still think I probably would have lost. But it might have been a bit closer. But I was quite afraid of his list. There was one list I didn't want to come up against, and when I found out I was playing him in my second game, I was like, "Oh, for goodness' sake!" And the fact of the matter, this is my first time ever playing Imperial Fist or a Space Marine army. So to go in with this brand new list, because I normally play Eldar, so brand new list, trying to remember the stratagems and all the litanies and and everything else, and going against Raven Guard, which again I've never gone against a Raven Guard player before. Everything was quite new to me. So even though I did lose, I wouldn't say badly. I think it finished like 29-17 in the end. I feel I did quite well against him. But yeah, that was my second game.
Cool stuff. My third game was against Mark Waterhouse, who was running orcs, and quite a shooty orc list. And I was very worried about this one. I actually felt I was in quite a good position against Dennis's list. We've played a couple of times before with similar lists, and I'd won both of them, albeit very close games. But I was feeling pretty confident I'd quite good against knights. I felt if I went first, I could shield against a lot of his stuff. Conversely, Mark's list, I was very worried about just the amount of boys and that my firepower is more suited to trying to take out vehicles and marines rather than orcs. And we got to the game. I saw these huge amount of boys and Gretchen and things come down. And I'm like, okay. And if I'm honest, I got my tactics spot on, but for completely the wrong reasons. So I looked at the list and I thought I'm going to really struggle. I thought there was going to be time pressure, as there often is with orcs. And I'm just going to chuck everything forward to try and get ahead and see what happens. As it turned out, Mark did a brilliant job of playing orcs quickly, knowing his stratagems, knowing his things, lots of little time-saving tips here and there to keep everything ticking over. So fair play to him, because running a horde for 3 games in a row and still being that quick at the bottom of game 3 is a skill, and I think it's always worth pointing that out. But when he got to game, it was it was alternative deployment. I applied basically everything with the word Wraith on the line, all my Gravs tanks behind that, and then the Vibros were kind of covering the backfield. And he unloaded a ferocious amount of firepower at me, but thankfully whiffed a lot of it. He did a lot of damage, don't get me wrong, especially to my Wraith Guard. But it could have been much worse. And when you're fighting the Super Shocker Assault Gun, when it's not rolling those 10 pluses and rolling low on shots, you just feel very happy. And thankfully, he didn't actually manage to get a kill first turn. And I just chucked everything with Wraiths at him and basically tied up all his boys all game, including shooters. So that meant that my Vibros and his looters had a sort of a long-ranged warfare. And from that, I was able to get ahead, even with grot shields and things like that. We had a big fight, a big scrap in the middle of the board, which no one really won, but crucially, no one really lost right until the end, when my Psychers got freed up to start putting smites and things into his boys, and he ran out of CP so that morale started to become a factor, especially when he ran out. He was using 4 CP to double shoot 2 units with different stratagems, and even starting off with 15 to 17, something like that. He ran out very quickly, and when he did run out, the tide quickly turned in my favor. The green tide turned in my favor, I guess, and managed to just outshoot him and keep him at arm's length the whole game. So a nice win, that one.
My game 3 was against Mike Casello. And if there was a dice high point at the tournament, this was definitely it. Mike plays a very aggressive triple disco list. He used to run it as Red Corsairs. He's now running it as pure Night Lords, which is very fluffy because it's all actually painted as Night Lords. It looks lovely.
His nominated the best painting, didn't he?
Yes, and he never wins. He always gets nominated but doesn't win. Just to rub it in, you know. And he was running a 2 Moiraxes, one with lightning, both with one lightning lock, one Graviton Pulsar, and his big knight was a Thermal Avenger, which is rather scary for me. His whole list is rather scary for me, to be honest, because there's a rather nifty Night Lord's Relic which he takes, which increases the AP of all of your attacks by 1, which on a Lord Disco changes it all from AP 2, which for me is laughable, to AP 3, which is terrifying. And he got first turn, and he also got frontline assault, so he got as close to me as he could possibly get. So I kind of thought that this game was going to be a complete wash. Turned out, no. Mike can whiff dice rolls, and I can make ridiculously good dice rolls. So he threw 1 Disco Lord into me, the one with the AP3.
It should be into your army, not into you.
Yeah. Well, it might as well have been into me, because he tore a hole in the sisters that I had screening at first. He actually pulled off a really neat trick. Night Lords have a stratagem to switch off all auras for a character.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah. It's an 18-inch aura. It's any Night Lords unit. You just select a character within 18 inches of it, and you turn off all of its auras for a battle round. And I thought I'd accounted for this because he wasn't running any Helldrakes, which he usually uses as that form of delivery system. And I knew that because it's only used at the end of the movement phase, the absolute closest he could get a Disco Lord was out of range of my Imagifier. The image of fire being the person that allows my army to ignore AP2, otherwise it just ignores AP1. Ignoring AP2 is a big deal when you're facing an Avenger Gatling Cannon and Bale Flamers. However, he pulled off a neat trick where he used Tide of Traitors to move one of his cultist units right next to my line and then use the stratagem, which I wasn't anticipating at all.
He's just got 10-man units of cultists, doesn't he?
10-man units, but it was 6 10-man units. Oh, no, 5 10-man units to fill out battalions and then 1 Chaos Space Marine squad, which is a backline objective counter.
I normally don't think of Tide of Traitors being used on a 10-man unit.
No,
you cycle a big unit.
So. Yeah. And also, like, I always forget about it, the fact that unlike a lot of the stratagems, like Green Tide, for example, you don't need the unit to be hurt at all to use it. You can just use it whenever you want to. Whereas Green Tide, I believe, specifies that you have to have half the unit dead before you use it, so you can kind of play around that a bit. I might be wrong about that, but I'm reasonable that sounds some right kind of restriction on it. So he took out one of the rhinos that was holding my Repentia and 1 Exorcist by throwing the Disco Lawn into it. It wasn't quite as successful as he could have had his first turn because the Thermal Cannon whiffed a bit and left one of my Exorcists on 3 wounds. The turn which followed afterwards, i.e. my turn, was probably the best turn which I'm ever going to have in Warhammer ever. I'd set myself up to throw Repentia into one of his Disco Lords and then was pretty confident I could shoot another one off the table, and then the one which was sat directly in my lines, I was reasonably certain I could smite to death with Greyfax or kill with Braziers and literally about a dozen crack grenades from units standing next to it. However, it turned out that I had a much, much, much better turn than I anticipated. I was able to kill the Disco Lord from full health with just 2 Braziers and 1 set of girls firing better bolters at it. Blessed bolts at it, which had damage to AP2 Storm Bolters. I rolled, I think, 9 for my Brazier damage, which is quite frankly ridiculous. And killing the Disco Lord right in front of me allowed me to basically remove its -1 to hit aura for the 2 Exorcists that it was sat next to. One of my Exorcists then fired at a Disco Lord. It was my wounded, so i.e. fully bracketed Exorcist, so it was hitting on 5s. It fired at his Disco Lord off on one of his flanks. It only got 2 wounds through, but I had a 6 for damage from a Miracle Dice and then rolled a natural 6 from another dice. So it just instantly died. This was a bit of a surprise because it meant that I had 1 entirely free healthy Exorcist to shoot. So it shot into Moirax and then killed that Moirax. Very unlikely. And then the Repentia ran into the other Disco Lord and killed it with ease. Which basically meant that Mike had lost almost all of his army and just had his big knight, 1 Moirax, which was currently being tied up by Repentia, and some cultists, a Demon Prince, and that was about it. So he said after the game that he basically that ruined the whole game for him. Like, he couldn't think properly and made a bunch of poor decisions. The game only ended, I think, turn 4 because we were very pressed for time. But it ended up being a narrow victory in my favour because Mike's still a very good player. But that's the game which I most anticipated just straight up losing because of the deployment, the opponent, and the opponent's list that I was facing. And it ended up being a victory in my favour, which it really shouldn't have been.
Rich?
Yep. Okay, so my third game was against another Raven Guard player, Daniel Farrell. He had, what did he have? He had 2 lots of Assault Centurions. One of them he had in Deep Strike, one of them he started on the table. He had, I think it was 3 lots of Eliminators. I think he even had some
war suits.
Some 2 war suits. Some Vanguard, and veteran squads in Deep Strike, and I'm sure he had some scout snipers as well. I'm just trying to remember. Anyway, I got first turn, and he had 1 Invicta war suit literally right in front of my Leviathan, and then he had 1 on the other end of my deployment zone, which were near some of my intercessors. And I took Big Game Hunter, so I was like, wow. I don't know why. I'm not quite sure why he did that. But I killed them in my first turn, so that got me 2 points. It's funny because the first two rounds of that game, I was on top, but then I would say from turn 3 to turn 5, he just flipped it around. Because I killed his I think it was my first or second turn. I ended up killing his assault centurions, the ones that started on the table. I killed more or less all of his eliminators by turn 2, 3 with my whirlwinds. But then turn 3, when he dropped his assault centurions, and I think it was the Vanguard veteran squad as well. That's when he brought it back. He had his smash. I think he had a smash captain and a smash chaplain as well. And he had what's the is it Shrike? Yeah, he had him as well. Like he literally went really aggressive. He got into my lines. I think in turn 2, he killed all my Centurion Devastators, and at the same time he tied up. He tagged both of my whirlwinds. So effectively, from turn 2, from turn 3 to turn 5, I was playing with more or less 1,500 points, and maybe less, because obviously my maxed out Centurion Devastator scores 420 points, and the Whirlwind is like 85 each, so that's 170. So yeah, and there's nothing I could do about that until around turn 5. So he was on top by a fair few points. But as soon as I got my Whirlwinds out of combat, because I think only one of them died, the Leviathan and the rest of my intercessors managed to kill the Deep Strike Assault Centurions. I managed to kill his Vanguard squad. And then by that point, he didn't have much left on the table. So it was getting close to the end of time as well. So I had to start rushing. So then I killed Shrike. I think he was sitting on one of the objectives. So then after that happened, I had to advance my Leviathan onto that objective. Then I had to clear him off another objective. He has some scouts on another objective. So I was literally playing for the last 2 rounds, hold and hold more. And I think I ended up getting kill and kill more. So the game finished 24-22 to me. So I just pipped him at the end. It was a very, very intense game. As well, we were both very sporting towards each other, but there was quite a bit of intensity I felt around it. I'm not sure if he felt the same as well, but nonetheless, it was a very, very, very good game, very close game, and yeah, it was enjoyable, but at the same time, I did really have to think, and I think I got quite fortunate towards the end because I did get some good rolls, and I think he did fluff some of his, especially his Vanguard squad, because obviously they had storm shields. I think he did fluff a few of those like save rolls. He got like a couple of 1s and a 2, which ultimately killed more than half of the squad. But yeah, that was my game 3.
So my round 4, I guess technically game 3, but round 4, I was playing Matt Reed. Matt Reed was running a Raven Guard successor Centurion list. Had two big melee assault Centurion squads with Hurricane Bolters and 1 Grav Centurion squad. And the crucial thing for this one was we were back to deploy first, go first, and I won the roll, because if Matt wins that roll, I don't have the screening to keep his Centurions at bay, and he just comes in and smashes me in the face, and the game is over before it begins, really. Thankfully, I went first. I did. Matt kept a lot of his Centurions in Deep Strike. He had various abilities to give them +2 to charge, so he was quite reliably getting in. But I think he underestimated my list a bit. He put one of his Centurion squads on the table quite close to me, and I was able to move various vibro cannons and guns around to just nuke a squad off the table turn 1 without really having to do a great deal. From there, I had a really, really good turn 1. my turn 2 whiffed. There wasn't a lot on the table. I only had a couple of things that could shoot, and I failed to get a kill, in fact. I did 2 wounds on a Thunderfire cannon and rolled 1 into 1 to leave it alive, to fail to get me a kill, and I think it ended up costing me he got a kill more off it, as he only killed 1 that turn, so it was a little bit of a swing back. And then, especially as his Centurions came down and started nuking things around them. But the crucial point of the game was turn 3, when his second Assault Centurion squad got into combat with my Wraith Guard, and he had to charge some Dire Avengers as well to make the charge. He'd come down, shot a couple of the closest Wraith Guard off, and had to make the 9 inches into the Dire Avengers, and had to put one of the guys on the Dire Avengers, so he couldn't focus all of them into the Wraith Guard. The Wraith Guard took a bit of a beating. Thankfully, they had Fortune in particular on, which saved a couple of them. And it meant that although my line sort of bent, it didn't break. And from there, I was able to regroup and chuck a lot of my stuff at his Centurions. They took a hell of a lot of firepower each, especially as he was able to keep on doing inhuman physiology. And it was a real scrap in the center. But as I've been able to screen him out, he couldn't get into my gun line. Eventually, the melee threats to each side kind of got depleted, and it ended up in a gun line off to finish it. And I was able to take a reasonably comfortable victory, albeit it had been very dicey at that sort of second, third turn mark. And as I said, if I'd gone second, he'd have smashed my arm into tiny little pieces. But there you are. Angus?
Sorry. I was just recalling my game 4. My game 4 was against Joe Malin, who was running Grey Knights fresh out the new Psychic Awakening. It was.
And I think it's fair to say one of the best painted Grey Knights armies you'll ever see.
Wonderful! Yeah, I mean, like Joe's been working on his Grey Knights for years. One of his Grandmasters still isn't painted. He was borrowing somebody else's Land Raider and somebody else's Stormhawks.
He was borrowing Leo's Stormhawks,
yes.
And Leo is in the same sort of painting ability range as me. And I think that's all that needs to be said about that.
It's funny, actually, because most of them was green, and the Land Raider was Dark Angels one. So, yeah, it was interesting. It was... I mean, Joe really wasn't trying this tournament, to be honest. His Stormhawks are annoying because the new Grey Knight rule for Tide of Shadows allows them to get cover permanently and an additional -1 to hit if they're just touching a terrain piece, which meant that his Stormhawks get because of the old Stormhawk, not Stormhawks, Storm Talons, they get the old reroll 1s on their armor saves. Yeah, so they get a 2-up reroll that rerolls 1s and -2 to hit inherently as soon as they're touching a terrain piece, which of course they always are. But I was very confident going into this game, to be honest, because one of the Valorous Heart abilities is to ignore modifiers, so I can just move an Exorcist and still shoot at full ballistic skill for 1 CP. So I was reasonably certain I could probably kill 1 or 2 Stormhawks on the first turn and then win by War of Attrition by screening out his deep strikes. Joe pulled a couple of things that I wasn't expecting. The first of which was to teleport his Land Raider in front of my lines with 2 strike squads inside it, and then charge my line successfully with a 9-inch charge and tie up a pair of Exorcists, which I'll admit, in hindsight, I really should have deployed properly. But to be perfectly frank, I was more worried about giving up first strike to the Storm Talons, to my sisters, as opposed to him, teleporting a Land Raider and charging it. That doesn't usually happen in games.
I can safely say I've never had that happen against me.
Yeah, I know, right? However, I was then able to surround the Land Raider to the point where he could only get out 2 of his strike squads. Also, 1 member from each of his strike squads. He found out, in hindsight, that Grey Knights now have the Machine Spirit's Revenge stratagem, so he could have automatically exploded it and done killed a significant chunk of my army turn 1. But he didn't know, so his loss. He then turned to deep struck all of his other stuff, so he had triple Nemesis Grandmaster Dread Knights, Chaplain with the reroll charges, and of course Drago. He used the new fancy stratagem to deep strike Drago 3 inches away to try and snipe off Sunstein. because he was using Purge Soul along with Vortex of Doom. This game had picked a fantastic anti-psychic relic to make your opponent subtract 2 from the psychic test within 18 inches of the bearer, and completely forgot about it. So I was relying on conventional denies, the deny strat, and Sisters denies, because I picked the Sisters deny trait that game. It worked out pretty well because I was able to stop Vortex and Purge Cell from going off. Oh no, I didn't stop Purge Cell from going off, but I rolled above his leadership because that was his leadership 9 and Drogo's leadership 10, so she didn't take any damage from that. He only succeeded on one of his charges for his Nemesis Grandmasters, which is very unlucky on his part. The next turn, I was able to shoot one of them off the board, kill Drago through Braziers and Condemner Bolt Guns, and left another Grandmaster and Nemesis Dread Knight on half of its wounds. It then charged in, killed a small amount of stuff. It then died, and I killed his last remaining strike squad and won the game because he got bootsed. Like I said, I don't think Joe was really trying. I think there's some really nasty Grey Knight list out there somewhere, but that's not it. Certainly not with the Land Raider. I believe when Joe wrote the list, he thought the Land Raider could benefit from the Tide, which increases the damage of its bolt guns. But it doesn't. You can use Psy Bolt ammunition on it, which converts the Hurricane Bolters into Psy weapons, which they clarified. But the Grey Knight Tide, which increases their, I think it's strength and it's something and damage, but it's definitely damage by 1 for all Psy weapons. But it didn't affect his Land Raider, so that kind of scuppered his plans. Oh, also quite critically, one of the things that swung the game was he switched his Tide to the Smite extra damage one, or Psychic extra damage one on turn 2 when he deep struck, and then tried to switch it back into the Psychic phase with a Grandmaster, but I was able to deny that, which crucially meant that he wasn't able to stick another -1 to hit and cover to all of his other stuff when it was on the board when I shot at it.
Fair enough. I've got the Ritual of the Damned open on my computer, and I was just trying to find the Psy weapon strat and put in Psy into the document.
Oh yeah, no, it's Psy bolts. It's in the original coda. It's in the original.
Oh, okay.
Bolt.
Psy is mentioned 239 times.
Yeah.
So there's your random fact of the day, and I'm not going to be able to find it. So
yes, Psy bolts increases the strength of a bolt weapon by 1, and its AP by 1. So it's an alright stratagem. It just costs 2 CP, so it's horribly overcosted. So if you use that on a unit which does benefit from Psy bolts, and then had the new ability, I guess it'd be quite nasty. I believe there's also a Grey Knight stratagem to reroll all wound rolls against a monster or vehicle. So you can imagine if you've got a full unit firing Storm Bolters at something with Psy bolts on it that all do 2 damage and a strength 5 and AP 2, that'd probably be quite good.
Yeah, it's not something you... I am a bit worried about Grey Knights, just because I haven't been recently, but I traditionally play a lot of Chaos, and the... I'm fine with them not being in the meta, if I'm honest.
So fun story about the tournament. So a friend of mine called Richard Smith came to the tournament, who played Joe round 3. And quite frankly, Richard should have won, but he made a couple of key mistakes. One of those mistakes was to deep strike his obliterators in the middle of the board when trying to table Joe turn 1, which meant that the next turn Joe dropped down and smited all of them off the board, because Grey Knight smites do, in the new smite extra damage one, do 4 damage.
Yeah.
Demons, and obliterators are 4 wounds apiece. So bang, 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 they're all gone.
Yeah. 285 points killed by 3 smites.
Exactly.
Not bad. It's not bad, is it? But Rich, how about your game?
Yeah, so my 4th game was against an Imperial Knight list with the Rusty 17. It was David Taylor, I believe. I'm not very familiar with all the knights' names. I know he had a Crusader, and he had 2 that were more combat-y ones. So it might have been the Gallant and something else. And then he had one that could deep strike, so I'm not sure if that's like a Forge World Knight or something like that, which was his Warlord.
This is the purple knights.
Yeah, that's the list. Yeah,
I really liked his paint job for the knights.
yeah. Beautiful. But he had first turn. My problem was because I knew that this knight that he had like a deep strike. I wanted to commit my Leviathan and the Centurions like as close to the middle as I can in my deployment zone, because in the middle of the table we had like it was a massive like centerpiece build. It was a massive ruin, and I had I had the open side facing me, and he had obviously the wall sort of side of it facing him. And my plan was, if I can advance the Centurions inside that ruins, hold on to that objective, and get the Leviathan in there as well, and just try and get hold more. It would mean he wouldn't be able to see them inside the ruins without having to come round. But my issue was, I knew he was going to deep strike that knight sort of in around my deployment zone. So if he did that, if I had done that and then he did that, then all I've got at the back is a couple of whirlwinds, some intercessors, and okay, yeah, the chaplain dread's there, but he would have had a field day at my back, and he probably ultimately would have ended up getting Killmore. So it would even out. I would have Holdmore, but he would easily have Killmore. So he had first turn anyway, and I decided not to advance my Centurions. I tried to kill his knights, and whilst getting Titan Slayer as well. He ended up killing my Centurions. I can't remember by which turn. He did deep strike the knight in my deployment zone, but the Leviathan was there to kill it. But he did end up, I think. So when he tagged my whirlwind, one of my whirlwinds, he did kill it. And then when my Leviathan did kill his knight, he did. I played his stratagem to auto blow up. So he did that, and I think he did mortals to a lot of my HQ units, like my Smash Captain and my Lieutenant. He did some to my other whirlwind, and I think I'm not sure if my other whirlwind blew up in that phase. It might have been afterwards, but it did blow up, and I couldn't, and I think I CP re-rolled it. I got a 6 again, so that wasn't great. By the time, I think it was funny because I think at the end of round 2 I was 12-5 up, and then turn 3 onwards it went to shit, and he just had me. Killmore, Holdmore, everything. He got all his. I think he got all his. I don't think he maxed them all out, but he almost maxed out his secondaries. And I don't think he killed a Leviathan, but by that point, I just had to hide the Leviathan because it was on its lowest wound bracket, and I think he had big game hunter, and it just would have been another point. But he was very clever as well. So every round, every movement phase, his movement phase, he would he'd look at my Leviathan. He'd measure 8 inches, because obviously that's the movement of the Leviathan, and then from that point he would measure the 24-inch range of the storm array cannons, and he'd always make sure that his knights were out of that range. So no matter what, my Leviathan was just it was void. That every round I couldn't get in range of any with his knights, and the only way I could is if I advanced. But then if I advance, I can't shoot. So yeah, he just outplayed me massively, and well done. It was he played a good game. I was quite confident before, because I thought, well, Imperial Fist against Knights, should be not easy, but what I've got,
You get a bunch of bonuses against the vehicles.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Saying that though, I've never played against Imperial Knights, a pure Knights list before, so I had to put that into consideration as well. So it was a new experience for me. But other than that, it was it was a good game. I made a couple of mistakes, but that doesn't take away that he played a better game than me, and he won like fair and square. Like he played a good game. So that was my game 4.
Fair enough. Just as an FYI, Leo was planning on joining us, but he's forgotten, so we're just going to call him an idiot and move on. But my final game was against James Pilkington, who was Rich's round 3 game. And I was kind of feeling that this was a win-win situation because we were up to table 3, I think, at this point, maybe table 4. So if I won, obviously brilliant, hooray. And if I lost, then I could say, well, I predicted him to come first, and I was just doing my job. And also, I didn't recognise the name, but I had played James before in a doubles event with Leo actually on my side that day, with the famous pairing of Tyranids and Imperial Knights banding together against James's Custodies and his friend's Imperial Guard list, which was a fun game. But yeah, this was not a dissimilar list to Matt's list. Lots of Centurions. I underestimated how much the Melters were going to do in this matchup. I kind of forgot the Centurions had it. But yeah, forget about 20 Belt Guns. Yeah, why not? And this one was interesting because it was alternate deployment, and I thought I'm going to really struggle if I go second. I'm going to deploy as if I'm going first. James comparatively wanted to go second, and put all of his stuff in deep strike, which is a nice thing about the alternate thing. He wasn't sure, so he put his stuff in deep strike rather than have that sort of deploy 9 inches away thing. Not deploy 9 inches away strategy. And it was interesting because he was talking to Mike pre-game about what secondaries to pick, and he almost went for recon. As it turned out, I controlled over half, and I should have probably picked recon. We said in our pre-game thing we'd really struggled to pick secondaries against James's list. I probably should have gone for recon.
Like I was playing on the table next to you and looked over, and it was just a sea of gold Eldar taking up almost the entire tabletop.
Yeah, I just wanted to get everything as far away as possible.
It was a defense in depth, it seemed like it.
Yes, and yeah, I had a pretty good first turn. Again, there were no Centurions on the table, so I could sort of pick and choose what was on the table and snipe things off from a distance. James's first turn back to me didn't do a great deal. I basically hid all my infantry in either transports or in deep strike, so his artillery didn't have any particularly good targets. They started picking off vibro cannons here and there. Every time one stopped to come around the corner to threaten his artillery at the back, he targeted it and picked it off. Very good target priority throughout. Second turn, I think I warped, timed, and advanced my Wraith Guard forward, chucked all the buffs on them I possibly could, and basically awaited the storm. I can't even remember if I got a kill in the second turn or not. It was very similar to the first game. And then 2 of the squads of Centurions came down and obliterated basically everything of mine that was just behind my Wraith Guard. So I had some Wraith Lords, I had some Vibros, and they Wraith Seer, and they just got either annihilated or torn to shreds, but clinging to life. But crucially, he failed both of his charges with his Centurions, which meant in my turn I could focus all my firepower on one, and the Wraith Guard, again buffed up to the hilt, charged the other one. And I got quite lucky with my rolls and my damage and things for one squad. I was able to take out one with shooting. Because of how thin across the table the Wraith Guard were, I couldn't get all of them into the other squad, but I got enough, and I wrapped the Centurions with Wraith Guard, which is probably the only time I will ever deliberately try and trap Centurions combat. But they had a brawl between them for a couple of turns, and the Wraith Guard came out on top, which I was pleasantly surprised by.
How effective are Wraith Guard against Centurions? Because you get, is it 2 strengths? What is it? Because I always get 3 attacks for the axe.
Yeah, they've got 2 attacks base. They get an extra 1 when they charge. They hit on 4s because they got -1 for the axe. They're strength 7, AP 3, D3 damage. If I'm honest, I rolled very hot against them in my first round to leave. I can't remember if it was a squad of 5 or a squad of 6, but to leave them with just 1.5 people left, which is why I was comfortable wrapping them. And then they won the war of attrition from that stage. And I was controlling essentially 3/4 of the board at this point. His second Centurion squad came down, again annihilated a bunch of stuff, but with that as the only focus, I was able to turn my psychic buffs into psychic damage, as it were. And I rolled super hot for my smiting and things. My executioner went off and did 5 mortal wounds. The Farseer then did flat 3 with the smite, so had killed 2 Centurions by himself. The Warlock was able to get Jinx off. The Spirit Seer got some wounds in. And then I didn't have a lot of firepower left, but they were able to finish off the Centurions, the last Centurion squad, and that was effectively game. I was on 3 objectives. I couldn't really get into his artillery at the end. I took some pot shots off it, killed the odd thing here and there, but was able to wrap up the win from there, which I was very pleased about. Because that was not an easy game, and if he'd made those charges off with his Centurions into the Wraith Guard and had more attacks on them before I'd got to swing, and me not having the bonus attack, it could have, again, been a very different game very quickly.
My final game was against Dennis, who you already mentioned, playing Euan. I had mixed feelings going into the game. I anticipated playing the Centurion list that you played, because that Centurion list was playing Dennis the previous round, and I kind of felt like it was very heavily weighted in the Centurion's favour, but obviously Dennis managed to pull through it. I don't know, maybe you can ask him about it at some point.
Yeah, I don't want to talk too much, but it was a very interesting seeing Dennis's play in that game. I watched bits of it, and one thing Dennis is very good at is being quite a defensive player, even with very aggressive lists, keeping things out of range, making scoring a point here and there on the opponents.
Yeah, he did that with his knight all the time. Like his knight was always sat behind everything else, which you could see in every single game. I think that's mostly because Imperial Knights are forced to make their knight a character, which meant it's basically easy Kingslayer points if you've got the anti-tank for it, which is why he used it so defensively. So in my game against Dennis, I was very worried about his various Blood Angel stratagems, because obviously Blood Angels can pretty much guarantee a charge out of Deep Strike with 3d6 charge, along with the ability to ignore Overwatch on one of their characters. Like, everybody's familiar with that. I haven't played Blood Angels, or hadn't played Blood Angels since the new Psychic Awakening dropped. So, and like during lunch, I was like frantically looking at the articles on what all their stratagems are and whatnot, which I think helped immensely. Because there are a couple of points where if I'd forgotten about his 6-inch heroic intervention that a Blood Angels unit could do, it probably would have cost me the game. I went second against Dennis. I didn't go first once the entire tournament, which I was a little bit sad about. I picked up Engineers, which I was a bit worried about, but I felt like if he was going to remove my Engineer squads, he would have to commit either his Death Company squad or his... oh, goodness, I've forgotten the name of them. What's the golden...
Sanguinary Guard.
Sanguinary Guard, yeah. He'd either have to commit one of those 2 units against an Engineer squad, and I feel like that might benefit him in the short term, but would ultimately ruin his entire game plan.
Not dissimilar, actually, to how I treated the bonus objective in my game, actually.
What did you choose as yours, then?
Well, sorry, in my game, I left the bonus objective unguarded, so that if he was putting one of his big squads into there, he wasn't smashing into my lines.
Oh,
so we were both trying to give him the choice of, you could smash my army or get the points and things.
Yeah, well, we had Corners deployment, and he put his knight right at the back, out of range of my exorcists, and then was able to hide his 2 baby knights round L blockers, and put his Death Company on the front yard. But within range to move to an objective, if move back into a building if he needed to. So there's no point in going first, so I didn't even try and seize against him, because I wouldn't have got a single point on the first turn. He then took first turn and properly rolled a 7-inch advance on his pre-game move on his Death Company, which was a little bit concerning, because it meant they were able to charge whatever they possibly liked. He chose to charge my 2 Rhinos with Repentia in it, which is entirely the correct decision. The Repentia are the things which would later go on to win me the game. He was able to kill the 2 Rhinos, but didn't have the capability to finish off what was inside them, owing to the fact that I can't. He must have. Oh no, that was it. So essentially, I deployed so that my Rhinos were. It's difficult to describe, but all of the Rhinos were tucked up in a castle with characters all standing around it. So when he destroyed the 2 Rhinos with ease, But with heroic interventions, that basically meant that either Celestine would get to swing or my Repentia would get to swing, one or the other, before he would get to fight again, which he was planning on doing, because he'd also charged a couple of other squads and was presumably intending on wrapping and tapping. But it meant I was able to wipe out his Death Company squad before it was able to do any more damage. All he did was kill 2 rhinos, which was bad, but quite frankly didn't really make a difference because his only non-line of sight shooting was a single Ironstorm on his knight. And aside from that, I had not quite a magic box, but it might as well have been a magic box for the purposes of protecting my Repentia. So I just sat the castle there, sat the Repentia inside the box, and plinked away at him. And because I was on the second turn, was also able to steal objectives. The one point which I felt very chuffed with myself on was when I dropped down a unit of Seraphim, popped one of his knights in the movement phase because the Seraphim have stretched him to shoot when they deep strike and extend the range of their pistols by 6 inches. So his knight was hiding around the corner from my exorcists, but it wasn't safe. I then daisy-chained them across the entire table so that they were within charge range of a Skitari squad of his. But when they completed the charge, they strung out across the table and had 2 guys next to an objective, which only a single Sanguinary Guard was on. So I was able to nab hold more often for the purposes of that, which I managed to accomplish through an 11-inch charge through Miracle Dice. Because something which I didn't realise before this tournament, but was told by Mo on the second game, is that Games Workshop have specifically fact that you're allowed to use 2 Miracle Dice when it's a single dice roll. So, for example, a charge roll. So you can effectively 100% guarantee a charge out of Deep Strike with Seraphim, which is extremely nifty. Yeah, and so we played tit for tat on an objective with some scouts and my Seraphim. The moment which really swung the game was the fact that he was forced to deep strike his Sangard away from me and in a position where they weren't able to charge because I'd screened out with so many Sisters units. I then gained a 6 from Miracle Dice and was able to advance my Repentia and then make an 8-inch charge with no support. It was literally just, please make an 8-inch charge or I might lose this game. And they managed to get into the Sanguinary Guard and kill almost all of the squad. Like, there was only 2 left in the squad, which I think sealed the game in my favour because his Sangard were, I believe, probably his last chance of winning the War of Attrition with me because his knight was equipped with a battle cannon and Avenger, which meant that my Exorcists were basically able to ignore it, and it did no damage to them throughout the entire game. So once that happened, the game became a small bit of a clown fiesta, which everybody else came and watched. Where his Sanguinary Guard was unable to... I killed a Sanguinary Guard in Overwatch with a Priest's Crack Grenade. That was quite impressive. And then that one Sanguinary Guard died to... I think it might have even been the Priest punching him back, which is quite depressing. And also his Smash Captain was unable to kill a Canoness. That was actually a ridiculous point where his... He had Quake Bolts as one of his relics, which... you fire a single shot at your opponent, at an opponent's unit. If it hits, then you get +1 to hit against that unit in the ensuing fight phase. So obviously, extremely good for a Smash Captain. And he had a 1 and re-rolled it to a 1 from the Captain Sora, which was quite impressive.
It's always frustrating when that happens to you, but it's very funny when it happens against you.
I mean, I don't really think it would have made a difference. It would have netted him another point of Headhunter. Basically, that turn cost him 2 points of Headhunter. But I ended up, I believe, a bit more than that ahead of him, like 6 or 7 points ahead of him at the end anyway.
I think I remember it was 7 points, but...
Something like that, yeah. He was forced to move his knight forward because he'd run out of scout squads on an objective, and I was able to plink a load of wounds off it for 3 points at Kingslayer anyway. So even though he was keeping it behind the entire game, he was forced to move it forward because he ran out of stuff. Yeah, and again, very lucky with matchups. If his knight had been a thermal knight, or he'd had more gravitons as opposed to a Helfrin, because a Helfrin's dead weight in a matchup against me, then it would have been more scary. Because the graviton one I was extremely worried about because it could quite easily have killed an Exorcist if it rolled well. But because we were on Search and Destroy, it was forced to walk across the table, and with its 24-inch range, it didn't really get within range to do anything impressive.
Yeah, I actually had the opposite thing against Knights. His Battle Cannon Avenger Catelyn is very good against my Vibros, and I'd rather take the risk of someone having the thermal cannon and then rolling low on it rather than have the more reliable Gatling cannon, for example. But there we are.
So another thing, I was thinking of when looking at your matchup, because the Graviton cannons must be your worst nightmare, right? So flat 4 damage and AP 4, right?
Yeah, they're
Strength 6, AP
my
4.
Vibro cannons are say 4+, so they're not great against those actually. But I kept all of my Wraith Lord / Seer well out of range of him, and he was my first target in my shooting phase over the night. And the failure to kill him was very frustrating. But yeah, he was really scary, and I made sure I even minimizing his impact, he still did a lot in the brief time he was on the field, even when I wrapped him for a turn and shot him with everything I had. So yeah, had a big influence on my deployment as well. But yeah, Rich?
Yeah, so my turn. My game 5 was against Jamie Stone and his Salamander successor army. He had 2 Contemptor Mortis Dreads with rocking twin las cannons, 2 twin las cannons. So that was scary. He had a Land Raider. I think it was a Redeemer.
This was the
Orange Space Marines.
We really liked, and I like his paint job as well, actually.
Oh yeah, that was a brilliant paint job, and it was a brilliant army as well. Actually, it's quite unique. Actually, I liked his army. So yeah, he had the Land Raider Redeemer. He had a drop pod with, I think inside was the Vanguard. Was the ones of the Combi Flame? I think it's Combi Flamers.
Yeah, Vanguard Vets with Combi flavors.
Yeah, that's it. He had unit 10 inside that. He had a bunch of scouts. He had some eliminators as well. Smash Captain, a librarian. Can't remember what else he had. But anyway, so he got first turn. It was one of those games. So we had 2 objectives in our deployment zones. So the way I saw it was I can't remember what the mission was called, but it's the one like if you control your opponent's primary objective, you get like extra points. But I think we both saw it as none of us was going to do that. So we were both quite content that that we were going to get none of us were really going to get hold more. So anyway, his first turn, I poorly placed on my whirlwinds, and he managed to get one of them with his dreads. So I was like, oh damn. And then I think after that, because I screened really well my deployment zone, he couldn't drop his drop pod in my behind my lines. So that was good for me. So I didn't see the drop pod in turn 1. He did try. I think because obviously he had eliminators. I think he did. I don't think he actually tried to use them because I know you can use them to. One of their variants is that they ignore. They don't need line of sight. I'm not sure if he used that one. I don't remember him doing it, but I think he just tried to plink off my Centurion squad of them. Anyway, end of his turn 1. It was my turn. So I used the whirlwind to try and kill. Because he had eliminators and some scouts in the middle, in the middle of the board. There was like a little ruins. He had them all, and he had a couple of scout squads in there, and the eliminators. I used the whirlwind to try and kill the eliminators. I failed, but because he had them on the top floor of the ruins, I could more or less see his scouts and the eliminators anyway. So I just used these Centurions hurricane bolts to literally kill them off. And I think I had to use like a 5-man squad of intercessors as well to finish the job off. The Leviathan was around the front. He just moved around to the side. He could see the other scout squad on the bottom floor, killed them. He had to put it was silly because I wasn't in flame range, so I felt quite bad for his scout squad. I just poured 20 Storm Array cannon shots into them, and ultimately they all died. So that was quite funny, but it had to be done. Because and then after that, I'm not sure a whole lot happened after that, so it's quite even. Round two. So round two was I made again another little mistake. Somehow I didn't realize. Well, I made two mistakes. I think I didn't realize that in my first phase I'd kind of like made enough space for him. Excuse me, to drop his drop pod in my back line. It was literally right in my back line though, and I was like, oh damn. And then my other mistake was when he did that. Is I completely forgot to use Auspex scan.
If you use that,
because
you can only shoot the drop pod. You can't shoot the people inside, so it's not actually that useful against it.
yeah, okay, true, fair one. So yeah, okay, yeah, I didn't know that. But either way, I didn't use that stratagem anyway. So I was like, okay, so he did that. Obviously, his Vanguard squad came out. He was just focusing on the Centurions. He did kill quite a few, but he didn't kill the squad. I only think he killed 2 out of the 6-man squad. His Land Raider then moved forward, kind of forwards around one of the flanks. Got in range. His Smash Captain got in range of my Leviathan for the charge as well. So I was quite worried about that. But I felt quite bad for him because when it got to his charge phase, he charged. Obviously, he used his Smash Captain to charge my Leviathan, so he got in combat. He fought. Obviously, I played Duty Eternal, so he managed to do only 4. I think it was 4 wounds on the Leviathan, and then at the end, after I fought, he paid a 2 CP to fight again, and he rolled just a bunch of ones. I think he only hit once, and I felt bad for him, but at the same time, I was thinking, oh, thank God for that. So his Smash Captain completely whiffed.
It's better to be a lucky general than a skillful one.
Yeah, which then ultimately meant my turn to drop pod went. That was a big game hunter for me. The Vanguard squad went. I took Butcher's Bill as well, so I was getting more points than that. Even though the Leviathan fell out of combat from the Smash Captain, the Smash Captain went down to, I can't remember who it was. I think it was my Centurions, and then from that and onwards, that was I think I was on the route to winning that game, because I think in the round after that I killed his Land Raider, and then what I did was that ruins that was in the middle of the board. I hid my Leviathan behind it, so it stopped him from wanting to move his dreadnoughts into sort of like my Leviathan's line of sight, because because from that point onwards all he was using his dreads for was just trying to plink off my intercessors, where most of them were on cover anyway, and I was making some good saves. And then I think it was only at the end, I think it was turn 5, I swung my Leviathan round, and I could just make out his scout squad that was on one of his objectives, killed them, and then I think that was the only round that I got hold more. That any of us got hold more, and then after that, it was game. I didn't kill his dreads; I couldn't get to them, and the chaplain was my chaplain couldn't see them either, because he was wary about my chaplain dread as well. So, but what I will say was, I mean, I won the game. What I will say was that it was out of everyone I played in that tournament, they were all great bunch of lads. But Jamie was just an incredible guy, and it was such a joy to play against him. Super chill dude, and I would say it was probably my favourite game of the weekend. That was, so it was good to end the tournament on a really good game, and also the fact that I went into the tournament thinking, well, my goal was to go 2 and 3. I ended up going 3 and 2, so I was super happy about that, and yeah, it was a great tournament overall.
Yeah, I think thanks to James and for Chris for running it and doing a good job there, and in particular to slightly weirder shout out to Leo's mum for providing a buffet.
Oh, that was great. He didn't have
cupcakes.
Yeah, that was. I think something they're going to try and do again more often in future. For reference, Leo's mother, who I'm afraid I don't know the name of, has a sandwich shop, and I wish I could plug it, but I can't remember where it is or what it's called. So apologies. But provided a buffet on day one, which was excellent and went down very well.
I think the shop's called Gilliman's Sandwiches. I can't remember.
It's definitely not that. But I think that would be Leo's sandwich shop. But yeah, any final thoughts on the tournaments, chaps?
It's great. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was a very surprise not to see Iron Hands there. But I mean, I guess not everybody's a meta chaser.
Rich?
Yeah, I reckon the same really as what Angus just said. Like, it was quite bizarre not to see one single Iron Hands list there, but I also believe that it's actually quite a nice thing to not have an Iron Hands list there, you know. And I think when you mentioned earlier, it was quite there's a lot of there's a lot of diversity in the lists and what people were bringing in and the armies and stuff, and which made it overall, I think, a really good tournament and a very enjoyable tournament as well.
Yeah, and I just want to echo what you said, Rich. That I thought all the people I played were very good sports. They were happy to allow things if I missed something. Typically happy to allow go back to it and everything like that. And yeah, very good spirit throughout. But we will leave it there for this week. Thanks for listening, and we will see you all next time. Bye.